So be careful that you're looking at the reality, not the potential.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
So a lot of people fall in love with somebody, or just if they had somebody to support them, if they had somebody to nurture them, they might achieve, they could be this, they could be that. You see the potential. If you fall in love with someone's potential, you've got probably a 90% chance that they're never going to meet their potential unless they choose to. What you want to do is to look out for that person who's showing up as themselves, not in their potential.
Okay.
Us women, we love to change people. We love to kind of nurture. We love to help other people grow because we're hoping they'll help us grow. When actually what it should be is that we are growing ourselves and then we're looking for our equal. And understanding, like I said earlier on, understanding what you want, because you're coming now into 28 to 35. So this is your nest building, right? So do I want marriage? Do I want children? Do I want to buy a home? If so, what would my partner look like? How many children would I want? Where would I want to live? This is where you're now coming into your foundation building for the future. Because 21 to 28, hopefully you've experimented, you've met a lot of different people, you've done some different jobs, maybe you've lived in some different places, and you've got a clear understanding and you've come to peace, which is where you're virtually at with who you are. So now you want to find your soul's mate. And what I find a lot of my clients do is they wait to be chosen.
So they don't have much action behind finding the person.
They don't know what they're looking for, so they wait for someone to choose them.
Yeah.
And especially if they fall in love with potential, they wait till he's no longer a drug addict or no longer a workaholic, or just until he gets over his ex, or until he decides to leave home, or until he's out of the Ludos phase, which is the messing around phase, right? They'll wait. So they wait to be chosen rather than choose.
Yeah. No, I know I don't do that. Yeah. But I know, I can also understand why people, because it's that, I think the exhaustion of dating comes in and people get lazier with dating, so they kind of wait for someone to
Dating
be ready
fatigue.
for them.
Yeah, understanding what you want. At the end of the day, you need to, where you are at on your phase, what's the next important? I hear people talk about failed relationships and it makes me mad. There's no such thing as a failed relationship, because from every relationship, you've grown more into the person that you were due to become or not due to become, and you will change. So without relationships, there is no growth or change. So the only failed relationship is no relationship, which we need to be careful at when we get to peace, that if we still want to keep growing, then we've got to take that risk into love and relationships, and not necessarily perfect ones. What we talk about in the book, Get Ready for Love, and on the program, is never compromise your non-negotiables, which are your top 5. But then you have nice to haves and priorities. That's where the list of, he's got to be a gym buff, he's got to be 6 foot, he's got to be earning X amount. They're the nice to have and priorities, okay? And they're just a list of things that the person you end up with may well not fulfill, but your non-negotiables should never be negotiated on. So, for instance, a non-negotiable for me is non-smoking.
Yeah, mine would be like not taking drugs, like at raves and weekends and stuff. Yeah.
Somebody could be, and that they don't want somebody with children. That could be male or female. And the problem is when you compromise your non-negotiables, you're rarely going to get your needs met. So look at your top 5 non-negotiables. And for most people, I already write it into the program that chemistry has got to be one of them for non-negotiable. So it's like so some people, I had a client the other day who was like, no pets. She was absolutely he can't have a dog. He can't have no, I don't want anybody with any pets. But if she went out and she met somebody in a club and she went out on a couple of dates, and how is she going to know that he's got pets? So this is where, when you start understanding what your non-negotiables are, you need to start finding out early on in the dating pool whether they're going to likely to meet them. Because if they talk non-stop about their dog, hello, if your non-negotiable is non-pets, move on. Doesn't matter how hot he is. Doesn't matter how much, like, move on.
The dog thing's hilarious because I've had so many guys love their dogs so much more than me. So I hate dogs for that reason.
Right, and there you go. Maybe that's her as well. She doesn't want to compete, or she can't compete, full stop.
How funny. When we talk about non-negotiables, we'll get into love languages, like how important it is to have conversations like non-negotiables, find out those early on in dating. When with love languages, how important is it to understand each other's and what the other person wants? When can that be a conversation?
Right. So love languages are really interesting because they show you how you receive love. One of the biggest things that I try and impart in my coaching work is that we teach people how to love us, right? By how we respond and the boundaries we set. We don't get what we deserve in life. We get what we expect. Okay, so how we show up. So if quality time is your primary love language, then dating somebody who's abroad or long distance is not going to work with you. And interestingly, there's something called the VAC representational system, which if you're visual, your love language is most likely to be quality time. Therefore, getting in a long distance relationship is going to be a problem. Full stop. So understanding both your rep system and your love language really helps you understand what you need from somebody. So when you're in the dating pool, you can select wisely. But what is equally important is once you're out of the dating phase and move into the relationship phase, if you're not understanding what their love language is, and it definitely doesn't have to be the same as yours, you just not have to presume that the way they do love is the same way as yours. So I constantly hear people say, I would never do that to him. Yeah, well, you're loving in a different way than they are. That doesn't mean they don't love you. It just means they show it differently. So acts of service, kinesthetics. So kinesthetics know things. They're quite spiritual people.
Okay, so this is the VAK, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
the VAK, visual, audio, or kinesthetic.
Okay.
Kinesthetics work out of their gut. They know things. They can spot. They can just tell if you're lying. They'll say very often, "I know how you feel." They process through their emotions. Okay, so their love language is very highly likely to be acts of service or physical touch. So actually, somebody not taking out the bins. This old thing about putting the toilet seat down or taking out the bins. What it's basically saying is the person who's complaining about it, that their love language is acts of service. It's a huge thing for some people. Somebody won't put out the bins or put the toilet seat down. So whereas if you're audio, then you've got to show up and those. I'm highly audio, so I need those texts and those phone calls that you mentioned earlier on. Okay. I don't have to see you for weeks. Months is fine with me, but you have to stay in regular contact. So understanding your own love language, then you can teach the other person how you feel loved. But then it's really important to then get a handle on theirs so that they can feel loved as well.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm more audio, so I need the words of affirmation. So I need someone to tell me that I look nice or that they love me. I need it to be said rather than them like bringing me flowers.
And this is where, so love only lasts 7 years. The oxytocin, the chemical love only actually lasts 7 years. Okay. So, and that's designed because originally what we were supposed to do was to get into a relationship to procreate. And that they say, give me a child to the age of 7 and I'll show you the man. What that basically means a child needs the caregivers for the first 7 years. So that's why love lasts 7 years, because it's biological. You meet the needs of the parents to stay together long enough for the offspring to be able to survive. If you think back to caveman days, like the child learnt by the age of 7 how to build a fire to keep himself warm, be able to cook food, ward off animals, to keep himself clean, otherwise he'd die from infection, those kind of things. So love as an oxytocin, as a chemical, wears off after 7 years. Hence the term the 7-year itch. Okay. And this also, the prime time when divorces are applied for, January in the 7th year of a relationship or marriage. Okay. So if you haven't done work like understanding somebody, their visual, audio, kinesthetic, if you don't know whether they're, and I haven't yet met a client whose gift giving is a, hundreds of people that I've worked with, never met a client that's over 15% as gift giving.
Really?
Yeah, never.
As their way of showing or receiving love. Wow.
And the majority of my clients at the moment are between 19 and 35, right? So we're not talking about because I'm working with a different generation.
19, that's young, isn't it? To come and seek help as well for love.
Well, they're actually coming in at the time, they're coming in through anxiety or through other mental health issues. They may be having panic attacks and things like that. But what's so interesting is when they come in, there's a lack of self-love. There's a lack of being able to feel love in their peer groups or in their families. It's always come down to love. So they might step in now because there's several routes you can access me via. From the mental health side of things, I actually want to rename mental health because, as I told you, when I went into hospital, I didn't have a label. My emotional health was 0. So I actually call myself an emotional health therapist rather than the mental health.
I like that. I think that something about the mental comes with a bit of a stigma.
Well, you're looking for labels. I have to, as a qualified therapist, I have to check in with your label status because I cannot do hypnosis with borderline personality disorders and things like that. So I'm clinically, I have to check in with your mental health. But it tells me nothing whether you're taking sertraline for depression. That doesn't tell me anything. I'm looking for your sadness levels because the wheels of life and love are about how happy you are on your journey. It's not about the labels that you've been defined. I had a client I've actually got a couple of clients with body dysmorphic disorder. Okay. So when you get a label like that or bulimia or anything like that, you start to see yourself as a problem. But actually it's just an output of sadness, a lack of love and a lack of control over life. These are all symptoms, whether they're depression, panic attacks. So at 19, they're not necessarily coming in because they don't feel loved or in a relationship, but they are struggling with being here in the world with panic attacks and depression. So therefore they can't access love. And without love, where is life worth?
I saw something the other day, and I do think that you need self-love to be able to receive love. However, I'd like to get your opinion on this. It was a social media post that I saw that said we need to stop drilling into people that you need to love yourself fully first before you can be loved, because it makes the person feel like they're not lovable. But you can not love yourself fully, but find love that can grow you into loving yourself.
Interesting. I see both sides. Okay, without self-love, the journey of love is going to be a difficult one because where does it land? Okay, if you have a bucket with a hole in it and you water it, there's not going to be anything left in the bucket after it. But at the same time, we grow through relationships. Okay, this is why I say you should always be dating as you're growing, but if you're hurting, you shouldn't be. So I think it's where you are at on your journey. So when clients come in, if their scores are under 5, then there's therapy to be required. 5 and above is coaching. So I think it's where you are at on your journey of life. Self-love is something that we're born with, then we lose going through big school. My stepson's, there's no such thing as big school. Go through big schools. That's when we tend to lose it, okay? In our peer groups, when we lose sight of who we are. 21 to 28 then comes is where we're supposed to, in theory, reconnect. Without that reconnection to self, you're choosing people that are inappropriate for you. So love will become much more difficult. So I see both sides. You have to be in relationships with people to be able to grow. But at the same time, if there's no self-love, you're going to be chosen and your journey is going to be part of theirs. You're not going to be somebody that happens to life. You're going to be someone that life happens to. So I can see both sides of it. But if you're continually getting problems in the relationships and you know that there's no self-love, don't continue dating because you're just damaging yourself. It's a form of self-harm. You need to heal first so that you can make better choices and go into a relationship from a place of loving yourself. Like I said, we're teaching people how to love us. So if we have no self-love, what are you teaching the other person? That I'm not worthy of your love. And I once saw a cartoon that said, this is so indicative of relationships. And the guy said, my wife told me she was fat 99 times. It wasn't till the 100th time that I saw she was right and that I believed her. Because if you show up as, I'm not lovable, I know you're going to leave me, I know that I'm not good enough for you, initially the person's going to fight that. But after a while, you're teaching them, actually, that is true. That is the truth, and I see what you mean. And it's something in therapy called what the thinker thinks, the prover proves. So you say it often enough, the other person's going to believe you. This is why half the population in America believe that Trump won the election, because you say things often enough, there'll be enough people that will believe you.
Gosh, that's so interesting, isn't it? Going back to the love languages, does how you need to be loved stem from how you were brought up, do you think? Like, I had someone on the podcast that said she needs to be told all the time that she's doing well, and words of affirmation, she thinks because she's a only child. So she always got that as a child, for example.
Okay. I would say to her straight away, I would smile knowingly, because until we get to the work, I can't prove it to her. But there's actually 3 parts of us.
Okay.
And it's her inner child who's dating.
Okay.
When she's just said it to me. She's just said, because I didn't hear that I was loved, because it's her inner child that's dating. That will always be needy, clingy, and end up as a manic relationship, that when he's out of sight or out of contact or hasn't replied to her within 2 hours, she's becoming manic. She's not connected to herself. She hasn't done the work, and there's not self-love there. So her inner child is dating. Okay. When it's a power control, when there's a need for us to be in other people's journey, it could be the ego that's dating. The only healthy relationship is your connection to yourself and you dating with somebody who knows themselves. That's why the work has to be done. So when you get 2 inner childs dating, it's so funny to watch, right? And I don't know if you watch Love Island at all, but there was a couple on there that were constant arguments, okay?
Right.
And they won the show. And they were just in their inner child the whole time.
Was it recent? The recent one?
Yeah, the recent one. So that was Sammy and Jess.
Yeah.
They kind of, they're just, their inner child were just totally looking for playmates there. So, and that will cause a lot of issues. That will be, so doing that, this comes back to why the self-love is important. Because the opposite of self-love is self-harm, self-sabotage, lack of self-confidence, lack of self-awareness. So the lack of self-love causes the problems in the relationships. So if it's got to the point where you're attracting the wrong people and you're having toxic relationship after toxic relationship, stop, get the self-love sorted out. But if you're growing in self-love, so I have clients that are healing from abusive relationships, go ahead and date. But you're learning from that dating how to love yourself differently, because you're doing the work. You're in therapy, you're in coaching, you're doing the work. So when you're showing up in your relationship, it's a completely different version of you that was in the previous one. So it goes back to your question of whether you should be dating. It's how toxic are your dating experiences will give you a good clue of how ready you are for a relationship.
Okay. I'm taking it all in.
But your scores are quite healthy. Your scores are 7. So yours is what we might call a unicorn state, where you're looking for perfection, possibly. Okay. And the areas that you need to grow in terms of relationship wise is maybe someone who challenges you. But I don't know how much you enjoy being challenged.
I think I quite like it.
You might like it or you won't like it.
No, I think I do.
Right.
I don't mind
need
it. Yeah.
Your scores are coming up as
you
need somebody who knows themselves.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
You need somebody who you can learn from. I don't know what ages you're dating in, but you need somebody quite mature, as in somebody who's maybe gone through a few relationships, serious relationships, and is not prepared to just date for the sake of it.
Mm.
So who you're looking for, who your soul is looking for, is that mate, is who you can grow with. And which is why I kind of pulled you earlier on with when you're teaching somebody else, what you are thirsty for is growth. So the person that you will be most attracted to is that one that comes in and you sit on their every word. You want to hear, you want to grow, you want to learn from them. So what's coming up for me, especially if you're audio, is look for somebody that you can sit and listen to.
Okay.
Somebody who you just want to speak to. Because with us audio people, and they're only 2 out of 10 of the population are audio. Yeah,
Great, of course.
Exactly. They don't, people, we do tend to overtalk people.
Mm.
We're not the best at kind of stopping back and like, what have I got to learn from this person? So rather than looking at somebody, my suggestion would be to, rather than looking at somebody for what you can bring to them, look at what can you learn from them.
I like that advice, because I was saying earlier to someone that's actually, to Jay Williams, that's done a podcast episode in season 1, episode 6 or 7, the mindset coach. And I was saying to him, I think the reason I'm struggling to date is because I am looking for someone that shows up like I do and what I can offer. So you're right. I need to like learn from them rather than having that expectation of, what I'm looking for. I need them to.
It's going to be somebody for you that's been through a lot.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's going to be somebody for you that's struggled and has conquered the struggles. That's what you're looking for. I can see in your scores is to level up, to become the next version of you, right? You're at peace with who you are. You're prepared to risk and go down on your scores to actually search for somebody who can challenge you and your ideas, because that's what you're looking for, is that growth.
That's interesting, because Jay Williams outside said the exact same thing.
Okay.
That you need someone that challenges you.
Yeah.
Because he said I remind him of his wife that needed that as well. I think we're quite similar. So yeah, that was quite interesting.
Your scores are showing me that. Your scores are showing that for you to grow, it needs to be somebody who's going to be challenging, and they would have struggled. And it's really interesting what you said earlier on, because there's always keys. We know everything we need to know. You said that one of your non-negotiables is someone who does drugs, who doesn't do drugs. Okay. So somebody who's a recovering drug abuser is going to have learned a lot. Somebody who's in recovery from that. So don't rule out people who've had that in their past. It's about what struggles have they come through and what have they learned from it. Because it's unlikely that drug abusers, you're going to know that up front anyway. Okay, but somebody who can openly say to you, I'm a recovering addict. That's somebody for you that you could learn a lot from. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in where they've been. It's about who they are and where they're going for you.
Okay. Yep, that's good advice as well. Touched on love languages, and you kind of mentioned love cycles earlier.
Right.
Can we expand on the cycles, which is Ludos, Eros, or Storge?
So I'll do it from what I can remember in the book. So it's Eros, Ludos, Storge, Pragma, and Manic.
Right. Okay.
So Eros, that's the fairy tale. That's the Beauty and the Beast. That's the... Well, actually, Beauty and the Beast is Storge. Now I think about it. If we're looking at all of our... But the fairy tale is that I just love bombing and all of that kind of stuff, that constant state of euphoria, always on the phone for 8 hours at a time. I know some people that... I have actually seen it on some shows. I've actually seen people who constantly have their webcam on. They sleep together. They're in different countries, and they kind of sleep with their cameras on. That's all the Eros stage. It can't be without them. You can't breathe without them. Everything's amazing. The sex is amazing. Everything like that. So that's Eros. It burns out after about 3 months.
Oh, God.
Okay, Eros. But what Eroses will do is, this is where love bombing comes in. People call it narcissists, right? It doesn't mean you can be Eros and not be a narcissist, right? But a lot of narcissists are very Eros driven, because it lasts 3 months, they'll move on. So that all of a sudden it was everything they were getting, that buzz, everything's new. Then they'll find somebody else to get their love supply from. So Eros is very, very fairy tale. Okay. So if we look at Ludos, now we can be anywhere on this cycle depending on if we're coming out of relationships. We've not been dating for a while. It can all be different. So Ludos is no strings attached, friends with benefits. Okay, it's casual. I don't want a relationship. Okay, so what you need to check in on is if you're in Ludos, especially for the men, if you're in your Ludos phase, but you're attracting women by the next one, which is inviting Agape. Agape is I'll do anything for you. Do you want to? Although acts of service is, do you want a coffee? This is Love Island at the moment. It's always about. There's this big thing about coffees.
Oh yeah, in the morning. Yeah,
it's acts of service. It's like, will you show up in front of my peer group and show that you care about me by giving me the gift of the coffee? It's a mixture of love languages in there. Okay, but Agape itself is self-sacrificing. Agape is the woman or man that will stay no matter what happens. Okay, and it's tend to what we want, what we think we want in a relationship. Okay, I want somebody to be there for me no matter what, to love me unconditionally. That's Agape love. So pragma love is practical, arranged marriages. It's and we talk about Charles and Diana. That was a pragma relationship. He needed an heir. He needed a young virginal type woman who could be queen. It's a very pragmatic relationship. But as we get older in life, when you look at people that have got 2 children and they're dating a man with 2 children, it's more pragmatic to be in that kind of relationship, because you bring the kids together and, that kind of stuff. So you've got Storge is friendship. I have a client who can only fall in love through Storge. They have to be friends first. There's no actual attraction, connection that he can work on unless he can sit there and have it. So he's not going to jump into bed with somebody in the first 3 or 4 dates. It's not going to happen, right? So Storge is about, I need to feel safe. And women who've been in abusive relationships, women who've suffered from domestic abuse or sexual abuse, can often only feel comfortable in Storge relationships as well, where they trust the person before they can then get romantically involved. So, and then the final one is manic love. So manic love is that he hasn't texted me for a week, for a day, sorry. What do you mean he hasn't texted you for a day? No, I think he's seeing somebody else now. Okay, you're stalking social media. You're getting your friend to drive by his house to see if there's a car outside, right? We all know that girl.
We do.
We all know her, and we've all probably been her at some point, right? But it can get out of hand, and this is where stalking can get involved, and I call it the tire slashing energy. I actually had a client, very much when I was first doing this work. She asked me to do a home visit, and she wanted me to get her boyfriend back. So I said, what do you mean? She said, he's with somebody else. She said, I've slashed his tyres. I've told his girlfriend that he slept with me last night, but he's just not coming back. So that manic energy is what happens very often as you're losing somebody.
Yeah. So I'd say I've experienced the manic during, when you're about to break up at any moment.
The mania.
Yeah.
So when you're in that phase, you can really confuse it with Eros quite easily.
Really?
Yeah, because the feelings, the adrenaline that's running through you, but I just love him so much. I'm that kind of stuff. So Eros people can go from Eros to manic. If you have somebody who is Eros and then they change their energy, which is very typical of narcissistic people, will just suddenly focus their supply on somebody else, then it can make you manic. It can drive you, and we all have the capability to be in that manic cycle.
So do you choose your love cycle then?
No, it's part of your journey where you're at in life.
Right,
so
I see.
If you think about your healthcare, if you're really vigilant on it, you could probably be healthy all of your life. But chances are that you're going to have good periods of life when you're healthy, other periods when you weren't, other periods when you've got to look at it. So it's a cycle, depending on where you've been. So if you've just had COVID and you're coming out, your immune system's really weak. So if you're coming out of a divorce, an agape, what you thought was agape, because nobody gets married if they don't think it's agape, right? Then you can suddenly go into a ludos stage where the last thing you want is commitment. You just want fun. Okay. There are some people, and they are people that are non-monogamous, have to understand that if what they need is Eros all the time, then they shouldn't be in a monogamous relationship. So starting to understand where you're at as part of what's your love language, what's your fact. We're very complex as human beings. Where am I at? And if Ludos is okay. So somebody came out of a divorce and they said to me, so what do you think of friends with benefits? And I said, can you refine the question? Is it okay? She said to me. I said, it's absolutely okay if it's what you want and what the other person wants. But what, as women, we tend to do is we will meet guys when we're there in the Ludos phase, but we try and turn it into agape.
Yeah.
Because there we are again trying to. So what I do say to guys is like, make it very clear. Don't just say it, I'm not looking for a relationship. Check in what they heard. Because she's just going to ignore it if she's not in the Ludos stage, right? So you need to check in and get her to feed back to you and clarify to you, where are you at on that scale? And it's very likely that as a relationship grows, you're going to change the cycle. Like I said, from Eros to manic.
Yeah.
Okay. You can go from Storge to pragma. So you could be friends, okay, or he really gets on with my kids, my family really like him. Yeah, I may as well accept his proposal of marriage. That's pragmatic, but it's all still love.
Okay, so there's no really one that we should aim for here. It's all just how
Most
you
people
love in
aim
that
for
moment.
the dream, which is the agape.
Yeah.
Right, which is unconditional love. And people will say to me, I just want a relationship like my nan and granddad had.
Oh.
Right? But then I say to them, are you prepared to do what your grandmother did to keep that relationship? If she didn't work, she raised children. She let him have most of the say in the relationships. He handled the finances. Most women are not going to be prepared to go into a gender stereotype relationship that their grandparents were in. Most not of your generation.
But were they happy relationships? I really hope you enjoyed that clip, and of course you can go back and enjoy the full episode. You can head to Amazon, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you go to get your podcasts, or of course you can watch on YouTube. I'll see you next time.